I'm Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska, and the Gallup offices in Sydney, Australia, as well as Adelaide tonight. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on July 21st, 2015. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room. It's available right below the main video window. One of the reasons to come and join us live, you can ask questions and get those answered live right on the program. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or even large organizations, contact us at coaching@gallup.com, or you can use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just GallupStrengthsCenter.com. For all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs, you can also catch the video in both streaming or downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows, as well as the links to our mobile apps where you can get your top 5 at your fingertips. They're all available at our coaches blog. If you only write down one link, this is the one to write down. Don't do it while you're driving. coaching.gallup.com. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup there in our Sydney, Australia office. And great to have you back on another Call to Coach. A minute ago I said tonight, but it's today for you guys. Welcome to the future.
Yes, that's exactly right, Jim. I'm always happy to be here, and I'm very happy to say that tomorrow is looking beautiful for you guys.
Good. We will look forward to it.
At least from where I sit, absolutely. And my guest today is Mandy Smith, and Mandy lives in South Australia, in Adelaide, and she's a Gallup-certified coach, and she has over 12 years of experience working in leadership positions in government, along with 5 years experience running a corporate training and development business called Star International Consulting. Isn't that right, Mandy?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Her areas of focus are leadership and talent development, change management, performance management, and organizational and team performance. So, Mandy, welcome to Call to Coach. I'm pleased that you could be here. One of the things that I love about your resume as I look at it is that you have a very broad resume, really. You've worked overseas in Dubai for quite some time and used strengths there. Lots of interesting stories for our listeners about what you did there and the success stories you had there. And you're also a local leader in your government as well in South Australia. So you're twin capping it there.
That's
so I'm
right.
sure quite a busy lady. So welcome, and let's start it off with hearing about your top 5.
Absolutely, thank you, Anne. It's really nice to be able to talk to you today and to share, I guess, what is our shared passion with the Strength Finder and the Strength Approach. My top 5 are communicator, activator, maximizer, input, and futuristic. And I like to think that I use all of those strengths in my coaching practice, though I do find that I play with the volume switches a little at times where, you turn up the volume of one particular strength. I often warn my clients when they first meet me about the activator strength as part of the coaching, because although I take my role very seriously as a coach in helping people to explore and contemplate and reflect on issues, my activator really kicks in terms of helping them see where they are to where they want to be and what actions are required to get them there. So it's a bit of a warning, a bit of a disclaimer I give to clients when I meet them the first time, that it is going to be very action-orientated coaching.
Yeah, and it's brilliant that we know that about ourselves, right? I just did a workshop yesterday, and it was all about talking to a group of entrepreneurial students, and having them have the ability through the CliftonStrengths Finder instrument to hold that mirror up to themselves and understand where their strengths and weaknesses were before they embarked on this big social enterprise endeavor that they were going on, was such a valuable thing. And we forget it, right? Because every day we're dealing with that. But for people who don't have that ability to look in the mirror and have the access to that tool, it's really powerful when they first come across it. I know when we talked a few days ago, knowing that you were coming on the show, we talked about how you came across the CliftonStrengths Finder instrument, and there's a story there to tell. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think Yeah, I'd love to. I think, as someone who'd been a leader for a long time in government, I did have and I do have a fundamental belief that people are truly awesome. I mean, it's an exception to a rule that you don't find someone that is truly awesome. And I think people really want to do a good job, but I struggled as a leader in always helping people to understand the potential that they had, and to realise that. I think if people aren't showing you how awesome they are, there's a reason for that. Either the environment's not right, or they're not clear of the expectations. And whilst I had strategies for those things, the latter, trying to tap into people's potential and the talents that they have, was something I had always really struggled with. So it was a bit of a personal quest I had. And so then I moved overseas, a bit of a family adventure. I just had my first baby and I was way out of my comfort zone at that point, so I thought might as well continue to live out there. And we moved over to the Middle East, and I thought, well, while I'm out here being brave, I'm going to try a different profession. And so that's when I went into business for myself. I met a fabulous woman, Jodie Johnson, who's now my business partner, and we set up the learning and development business over there. And without even realising it, I guess our business model was playing to our strengths. We did the things that came naturally to us and the things that we enjoyed, and it was really successful. And before long, we were one of the leading corporate training providers at that time. And so as part of that, started to win some pretty big multinational clients. And the client that I'm forever to this day thankful for was Sony Pictures. So I won a 12-month training and development. I ran a 12-month program for all their staff at Sony Pictures. And as soon as I walked into Sony, I noticed that there was something really different about the organisation and really cool. From meeting the receptionist, this engaged, energised person, to walking through to the first meeting room and, you're going past people at water coolers busily talking about the projects that they're working on. In the lunchroom, there was people engaged and excited about what they were working on and calling other people for advice. And it didn't take me long to realise what their secret was, because the first training they asked me to deliver was a training session for their new employees called Know Thy Strengths. And so basically they had, every new employee of the organisation got given the Tim Roth, Donald Clifton Strength Finder 2.0 book with the code in the back. And before they started, they were asked to do their Strength Finder assessment and to bring that along to their first day. And they were introduced by two other people in the organisation by their strengths. And then within that first week, and often it was their first day, I would deliver this training workshop for them, which was understanding what the strength approach was about. So I had to very quickly get up to speed with what it was all about. And then sort of in a workshop scenario, look at, well, how are those top 5 that they have, how are they going to be able to use them in their role? And how would those strengths help to drive business forward at Sony Pictures? And it was such a powerful first day experience. But for me, it was like I just found the holy grail. You can imagine the music playing, because this is what I'd been searching for. And so then I started using it with other clients in Dubai. Obviously, when I came back to Australia, I went back into a leadership position in government, mainly because I wanted to battle test some of the new concepts I'd been trying and teaching, but also to have that experience of, again, leading a large team, but righting the wrongs, doing it from a strength-based approach, I guess, and set up the business over here as well, and went and did the strength coaching course, which was mind-blowing for me and an amazing experience. And so that's sort of how I came across it and how I'm using it now.
Mandy, sometimes coaches start zeroing in on whether they're good with individuals or they're good with teams. And it sounds like maybe you've gotten the opportunity to do both. Or do you favor one over the other? Do you find yourself gravitating towards deep personal relationships, or I like to be in front of big, gigantic, crowds leading them through a strengths exercise?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. I was really scared of the coaching element. I didn't see myself as a coach, and I really got my arm twisted into it as I was running leadership development programs. You'd have an individual saying, I'd really like to work one-on-one with you about these specific issues. And no, I'm not a coach. I'm not good at that. But then when I sort of did have my arm twisted and started doing it, I absolutely loved it. And I realized I'd been doing it all along in managing people and in managing teams. You do that one-on-one work with individuals anyway. anyway. And I think where my confidence really came from was doing the accelerated coaching course as well. So now I would say where it was once predominantly my work would have been 90% working with teams and working with large audiences, so to speak. Now I would say it's a bit of a reverse. I'd say at least 80% of my work is doing one-on-one coaching.
And are you comfortable with that? I mean, if for you, is it really rewarding? Again, you don't have to pick either or. Just for some people, it's more rewarding. Do you find that's very rewarding for you?
The one-on-one? I think the one-on-one certainly is where you really get to feel the impact that the strength approach has in people's lives, and that's incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
Do you have a story that you could tell around that one-on-one impact? Because that is, people love to hear those kinds of stories. I love to hear those kinds of stories. I might cry when you do this, but yeah. And I may have put you on the spot if I have. But do you have a story of a one-on-one impact that you've had with somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. The story that there was this one client that really brought home to me the impact that this approach and the tool actually can have in people's lives. It was a client that was referred to me by a manager, and straight from the get-go, I had a little concerns about this client. The fact that it took us about 2 months to actually get in the same room together for the first session sent some alarm bells for me. So we had meetings organised, and she was sick often, or you would call at the last minute, and overwhelmed with work and had a deadline that she wouldn't be able to meet. And you start to think, oh, what's going on here? Does she really want the coaching? And my observations in that first meeting was someone that was very overwhelmed. Had an energy where the weight of the world was on their shoulders a bit. And I asked, what was her goal for the session, and she talked about not wanting to feel so rushed at work and being able to somehow cope with what she perceived were unrealistic deadlines. And it was a really interesting, we did 4 sessions together, and it was an interesting experience. It was very difficult for this person to actually claim those strengths. It took a little longer than usual, and I really found, although I try to be client-led, I did find that she wanted to keep coming in to talk about the specific issues, but because those strengths hadn't been claimed yet, I had to almost keep pushing the conversation back to, tell me about a success. Let's look at how you've used those strengths. Yes, I understand these are issues and this is something you're struggling with, but what are you doing well as well? And slowly we started to, I could almost start to feel her self-esteem rise as part of that, and starting to sit a little bit taller. And then we could get to the point that we could start aiming those strengths at those specific goals that she had. And what happened in between the 3rd and 4th session was amazing. What happened was there was a little bit of a break. It was about 4 to 6 weeks, which is longer than I would normally have in between sessions, but she was traveling, I was traveling, and we got back together, and I'll never forget it. Walking up to her office, it was a glass-fronted building, and I waved at the window, let her know I was there, and she came sort of almost bounding up to the door to let me in and gave me this big hug, and that never happened. That was not how she would normally greet me. And her energy was completely different. She looked fantastic. She had, a sparkle in her eyes, and I was, wow, what's happened? You look amazing. I said, come on, let's go upstairs. And we went upstairs to the room that we met in, and she said, oh, I've been so excited about this session because I just wanted to thank you so much. My life has turned around. I've just lost 5 kilos, and I'm sitting there completely confused. We never even talked about her wanting to lose weight. We were talking about issues at work, and I'm completely confused to the point that I have to say, I'm starting to think, oh, you got the right coach here? And so I had to ask, I'm a little confused. We haven't talked about relationship issues, and we haven't talked about you wanting to lose weight, and I'm surprised at why you're thanking me as part of that. And she said, because this coaching has helped me realize that I'm actually pretty good. And I'm worth looking after myself. And the strategies that I've been applying at my work, which those strategies were aiming her strengths, those strategies were successful, and I started to use those same strategies in my life. And, wow.
Yeah.
The impact. It was that moment that I went, this stuff really matters. This is more about just what's going on with people in their work situation. This is whole of life stuff. And it really made me realize just, that's what I do, why I do what I do. because it's
Yeah.
just the impact that it can have.
It's a great, powerful story. We had an entrepreneur in here, a local Omaha entrepreneur, and he had said, he'd asked, we had him talking to our interns, and he said, how many of you kids make your bed in the mornings? And just a few of them raised their hands. And he says, actually, a really important discipline to have, because it makes you feel tidy and fit in the mornings before you leave, right? It's one of those kinds of things you feel good about. And I think, while strengths is way more powerful than making your bed in the morning, I think it's one of those things where you mentioned it, right? You begin to see the worth that you have. No longer are you trying to do those things you're not very good at, but you go, you know what, I'm built with a purpose, and I've got these 5 things that I can identify, and we know there's more than that behind the scenes, but you can really identify those. Have you had a few other aha moments? I mean, have there been strong aha moments like that with any of the folks that you've worked with?
Yeah, just something you said resonated with me then as well. It's often about those situations when you're out of your comfort zone. And, this is even my own personal situation, where at the moment, recently, I've been having to be involved in a very complex negotiation in the workplace between 2 parties. And negotiation is not something I have a background in, a lot of experience in, and restorative is right down there in the 30s for me. So it's something that I was feeling really nervous about, and not feeling really confident about how to approach this situation. And then I sort of asked myself, well, what would I tell a client? And it's, what strengths have you got that you can apply to this situation? And so suddenly I started, going, well, instead of worrying about fixing these problems because we'd got to a stalemate, let's use the strengths I have. I've got the communication skills there, and a good questioning, that I use as part of my coaching. So I went out and used my relationship building themes, and started to chat with the people that we were negotiating with, and just sort of understanding things from their point of view, not trying to solve anything, because that's not what I'm really great at, but just gathering that understanding. And lo and behold, that unlocked some of these stalemates that we were at, and we were able to get to that solution focus. So again, it's always being able to, that gives me so much confidence when I'm out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and you're new to this from a business perspective. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, a lot of people are fearful, and we get those questions all the time. How did you do this, right? How did you kind of pull this off? Can you kind of walk us through your business story? I mean, there's other coaches out there who are thinking, I can't do this. Maybe even you thought that for a while, but can you walk us through that story?
Yeah, it really is about learning as you go, and I think that's what I love so much about the using the tool, because every time I meet with a client, there's a completely different set of themes. I mean, 1 in 33 million chances of getting the same people with the same theme. So you are constantly learning. But I even look back to, when I first came out of the course, and so excited with all this knowledge I had, and how I was, I guess now I look back on it, my combination of my communicator and my input meant I always had something to say and something, and something to share as well. And so really having to learn to turn those volume switches down, and because as you go, you reflect on each coaching session you've had. And for me, it was about understanding that me telling someone something is not going to have an impact. Me helping them to discover it themselves. And so the coaching being very much about holding up a mirror for someone, and being quite empowered by realizing that the answers are within somebody. I don't have to have the answers. My job is to ask the great question that helps them to find that. And so I'm constantly learning. I mean, one of my quests at the moment is to really master the skill of asking great questions. And so, I'm constantly reading books on that and trialing different approaches and different questions. And I really, in preparing for a coaching session, it's really for me about, I do all the preparation work on the background work on their themes and have a bit of a session guide, but it's really about what are some great questions I might be able to ask this client, and then being really client-led. For me, the outcome of the session needs to be an insight and an action. So, I want to be able to ask a question that allows the client to gain some insight, and also that they can end the session with having determined an action that's going to move them a little bit closer to their goal. And so when you only have that as your goal for the sessions, it's quite liberating, and then you can be very client-led as well.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I just got some coaching, just a couple weeks ago. It wasn't very long ago. I have a coach here at Gallup that works with me, and exact same thing. She was like, we want to come out with an insight and an action. And that was great. I mean, that was just, it was good for me. Just, we practice that as well. I mean, we say these things, but we practice that here at Gallup as well. So some good advice. You mentioned a little bit of tools in this. We have a whole bunch of resources available for you and the stuff that we're doing. What are you finding particularly helpful for you as a coach when it comes to resources? What is working well out in the field as you're working with people? Are there external resources or things that you're using that is working really well?
Yeah, I guess my input strength means I'm always on the hunt for new resources and tools that I can use in my practice. I really do appreciate the Theme Thursdays, and if listeners haven't checked them out, do so. In preparation for going to meet with a new client, I always listen to the Theme Thursdays. It might be that they've got a strength that I'm not overly familiar with or haven't come across that frequently, so I'll go and listen to the full Theme Thursday, or sometimes, to confess, on a bit of a cheating, I'll just go listen to the first 10 minutes of each of their top 5, just so that it brings it to the forefront of my mind as well. And I just find that resource incredibly useful. And there's other tools. I mean, as part of the coaching that we do, we have a plan that we work through with clients that we've adapted from many others, but so that we're very clear, and I guess this is where my futuristic strength comes in, so people can be really clear on the vision of where they're wanting to be and what are their values and what are their year time goal that they want to achieve, and what habits will they need to establish in their life to get to that goal. So we use that tool quite a bit, but different tools for different clients, and I think that's what I really appreciate about it. I had a client the other day who was deciding between 2 jobs, and so came to me wanting to go, well, these are my strengths, which job do you think I should go for? And then asking her questions about that, and said, well, what are your passions? And she said, that's something I've always struggled with. I'm not sure what my passion are. And I remembered that I'd come across somewhere a passion test. I think it was by Janet Bray Atwood. I said, well, let's do that. Let's try that and see if that reveals anything. So having different tools that I can and resources I can share with clients is really useful.
That's good. And thanks for the feedback on Theme Thursday. We put a lot of time into those, and they'll actually be coming back here this week. Our first returning Theme Thursday is here on July 23rd here in the United States, and we'll finished the rest of the 10 of those. And we do have those short versions for you too, if you need them. Right? We've cut those out, and it's not cheating. Don't feel like that's cheating. Well, let me ask you this question. I think we have Ann back. Ann, are you with us there?
The wonders of technology.
Well, hey, you made it back in. Let me ask this question, and then I'll let you take back over, Ann, on that. How important, Mandy, is the training to you? I mean, we provide this certified coaches training, a full week worth, coming in, getting really immersed. Maybe you can kind of give us a before and after look, and how important was that training to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to Anne earlier about the fact that I had used the Strength Finder tool in Dubai probably for about 3 years without having the accreditation. So going to different clients and suggesting that they use it. And I had no appreciation of just the capabilities of the tool until I went and did the accelerated strength coaching course. And for me, that was a mind-blowing experience. As you said, that's that full immersion. So it's the 4.5 days, and it's not 8-hour days. For me, it was living and breathing strengths for 18 hours a day, and you can't walk out of that experience without feeling really confident in using the tool and having an appreciation of its capabilities. It was through the course that I really got to understand the multidimensional aspects of the theme. So the lens that people with those themes may look for through the values, the needs, what they might be able to contribute. You get much more in-depth understanding of that, and the balconies and basements of each theme. That was stuff that I just didn't really have an appreciation of before, and the chemistry between them. I realised that I was probably not reading the 34 themes correctly, and now I sort of get a sense of that top 10 and the bottom 5 telling a bit of a story, whereas I probably hadn't really realised the impact of those supporting themes before. And I think in the course as well, I had my own aha moment, which is really nice. It was almost like having a four-day coaching session on myself as well, which was lovely. But I had and I knew I had a really, and I struggled with a limiting belief about not being smart enough. And so that had really been holding me back in my business and in my work because, oh yeah, I'd love to do that, but I'm not smart enough for that. And I knew it was there, but knowing it's there is one thing. Getting over it is a complete different thing. And it was through the course and really having that intense microscope in on my own strengths and how I use them, I could really let go of that limiting belief because smart wasn't really that important for me. I could use the strengths I did have to achieve what I wanted to, and it was just this amazing experience that it was definitely one of the highlight learning development opportunities I've ever experienced.
Oh, that's great.
Sorry guys that I dropped out there briefly. Mandy, when you think about the CliftonStrengths Finder instrument and you compare it to other tools that you've used, I know when we talked before, you said you felt like you had found the Holy Grail, and I thought that was amazing. Tell me why. What was it about it that was different for you, or what that was so special about the instrument itself?
Yeah, I guess I had a lot of experience with other tools, particularly with my background in government. We had, working in different organisations as a participant of different cultural change projects, but also as a leader of a cultural change project. People are using different tools, and what I found different about the Clifton Strength Finder is just the simplicity of it. And a couple of things with that is that the language that's used is really accessible to everybody. And so a few of the other tools that I had been using, people didn't necessarily identify with the language that was used, and particularly when you're working in a large organisation, and I was working in government organisations where you have a diverse workforce from people from the street sweepers through to the social workers, to the traffic engineers, to the planners, to the executives with MBAs. You've got this really diverse workforce. And the language wasn't always accessible, whereas you can look at anybody's top 5 and people sort of get what that means without appreciation of what sits all behind it. But I think the only one I ever get questions about is woo, and once you explain that's win others over, then people get the language, and there's a simplicity in it that I really appreciate. It's also very accessible because of the affordability of it. Some of the tools I had worked with in the past, they were only ever, the assessment components were only ever offered to senior leaders and maybe middle managers if there was a big enough budget, because you're talking $500 just for the assessment, and then there's the coaching that follows and that type of thing. Where with Strength Finder being $10 for your top 5, I mean that's the minimum that people can be to participate with. It's very easy to filter it through a whole organisation very quickly to give that, and people starting to develop that shared language, and very positive, rather than people looking at it as a way of, okay, well, I have to be something I'm not. They get to be more of who they already are. And so a really positive space to be working in, very energizing for people. So for me, I'm just a convert.
Yeah, well, it's a very democratic tool, and I think that's one of its greatest strengths. Do you couple it with other tools? Do you use it with a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or other things? Have you found different combinations that are very powerful?
Yeah, I certainly have. The Myers-Briggs is one because I've had some background in that I have paired it with. Though for me, I must say, I've tended, since I've found it, I've tended to really just focus in on using that. I do like to the simplicity and not to make things too complex either, and I do find that between that and the other resources with the Q12 and things that Gallup offer, that I think there's a package of resources there that are really useful.
So because we'd like to focus on strengths and success stories, I'd like to hear if there's one success story that you could talk about with one of your clients that you could share with us, and be very specific about how strengths worked so effectively with that client. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. And I did talk a little bit about a story when you dropped out, so just so that you're aware, I did give that. And I probably to really, and I know that in these call to coaches you like a bit of specifics, and I'm thinking I probably wasn't specific enough in my last story, so to give some specifics of what actually went on in that session would probably be useful.
Great.
One of the things that as I talked about, that is being aware that the answers are within people, and so asking those questions. And one of the things that I learned from that experience, and that I always do now, is rather than to start a session by saying, okay, so this is what we talked about last session, is to get them to recall it, because that's when you get some insights into what was relevant to them, because what they recall will be what was relevant to them. And so, and again, as I spoke earlier about coaching, you're always learning, which is fantastic. But I found with this particular client, by saying, well, tell me, what do you recall about our last session? That gave me some real insights into what was relevant and where this session needed to be going. Some of the other tips I have in working with that client was very much about being aware of the language that you use. So one of the questions I was asking a lot with that client was, I would ask, well, why do you choose to feel that way? And I was very specific with that language, because one is I wanted to emphasize choice in that. It was a client that was feeling as though they didn't have any control or any power of the situation. And I think that emphasizing that there is always a choice, and if that choice is only how you are going to respond to the situation or how you're going to feel about the situation, is important. But also the why part of that question, I think, was also important, because I think particularly for that client, but I think we all fall into this trap where when we're busy and we're putting out fires, we go onto autopilot and we don't often stop to ask ourselves, well, why? Why are we doing it that way? Why are we feeling that way? And so I think that was something, there was a lot of why questioning going on with that particular client. Because we had spent the time at the beginning getting the goal right, I think sometimes we rush into, okay, well, that's the goal, but you need to unpack it a little bit as well. And so understanding, well, why is that goal important, and what would it actually look like if that was the situation? Then it was very easy to start going, well, what actions, and getting them to commit to actions that will get them there. So I would always give homework, because that's just my style. So I always, so it might have been the first session, I think, in that particular client, we talked about going away and refining what that goal was. Another session was working out the values, because I think people's values are really important to discuss, because they become a bit of a compass for decision making. But what's more important is the homework they give themselves. So I always get a client to set their own homework, and in this particular case, some of the homework she set herself, and was saying, well, again, looking at from how we get to point A to B, what's going to move you closer. Some of the things that she identified was that she needed to have a very difficult conversation with someone. So that was the homework. Go and have that conversation. We talked through what it might look like and what she was worried about, and I describe myself often as the accountability buddy, and I make people, give me permission to be that. But I would say, well, let's talk about when that conversation is going to occur, and I would be emailing the day before saying, good luck with that conversation, and I'd be calling after the scheduled time to say, how did it go? So that then people, do feel that accountability of it, and that's something that has then fed into why we set up the STAR strategy groups, which I know I haven't spoke about, but after the coaching program, mine are normally four sessions long, is people really appreciate that element and worry that they're going to lose the momentum. And so one of the reasons we set up the STAR strategy groups was so people can come along once a month and continue with that focus and that accountability system for achieving their goals.
So that's great. I remember you talking about the STAR strategy groups, and I was mentioning that it sounds a bit like as a strengths meetup group that are sprouting up all over the globe at the moment. But yours has another twist to it, because everyone that's in that group has been a client, correct?
No, not necessarily. We do have some people that haven't been a client. Really, the driver of that was to offer something to past clients, but also we're very driven to making strengths accessible to people who might not otherwise get the opportunity. Some people don't work in organisations that give them coaching and have, promote these sort of tools. So we do have some people that aren't, but everyone that is involved in that group has done the strength assessments, got their 34, and it really is, I guess the best way to describe it is a bit of a combination between a goals club and group coaching. So what we do is in those meetings, firstly they're free. We wanted to make them very accessible for people. So they're free, they're once a month, and people who sign up, become members of that, have sort of done their work with us on determining their vision and what their goals are, and they've also done their Clifton Strength Finder. And so within that, they come along each month and they report on their goals. There's really that accountability system set in there. And so it may be just a huge high five because they're nailing their goals and achieving, or they may be struggling with a goal. And that's where the group coaching comes into it, where we might be able to really talk about the specifics of why they're struggling and again, looking at where they could aim their strengths at those goals. So if I can give an example of a specific story, one of our members was, we're very holistic, so we look at the 3 pillars, so we look at their careers and finance, we look at health and wellbeing, and we look at lifestyle. And so in their health and wellbeing goal, one of the things they really wanted to get fit and healthy, and for them it was very important to lose weight. And they were struggling with that, and that was, you know, the one that they were putting up their hand saying, I need some help with this, guys. And so as a group, we started to really work through that and ask, you know, well, what have you tried and why do you think it hasn't worked? And let's look at your strength profile. And in their top 5, they had activator, adaptability, communication, can't remember the others off the top of my head, but in the and then at their bottom they had discipline, focus. So you start to realize that the strategies they'd been applying were probably setting them up to fail. So, you know, we worked together through that, and they came up with this fantastic way to achieve their goal through applying their strength. And for them, it was about, they loved the activator, meant they loved trying something new. So every fortnight they tried a new approach, and the learner in them went away and they found out all the science behind it, and then their communication strength, they used a blog as their tool to communicate how they found that. And of course they loved this experience. They got to play to their strengths and have fun, and you know, there's no surprises that it became very effective for them. And so that's the sort of how we use the strength coaching within the goals club, so to speak. And as well as that, we do, each month we do a success strategy. So we talk about a success strategy to make sure that our members are set up to succeed and what they have the tools that they need as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that sounds very good. I know you said you had a wait list for those, so it was something that people were really, it's obviously been a huge appetite for that, and we're finding that as well with our strengths meetups, and perhaps there'll be one set up in Adelaide before long, because you may find that it's a good way to address the needs of your wait listed people until they can get into yours. Let's shift gears for just a bit. I want to talk a bit about your experience overseas and working overseas with strengths, and just how, you know, I guess I often wonder, are there issues or challenges you face with clients that have language, you know, English is not the first language, any issues around using the tool and instrument with folks from another culture, and any tips for our other coaches and listeners who find themselves in that same situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in using the tool overseas, one of the things I found was it actually helped with some of the cultural differences. So working with different leaders over there and different expectations around what leadership should look like, the Strength Finder really helped with that in order to really unpack to people, well, what they had and what strengths that they could, you know, there wasn't a, you know, people would ask, what strengths should I have as a leader? And it was great fun to be able to work through with people that there isn't a set of strengths that we're looking for. It's about understanding those strengths and leveraging them. I think, you know, when I look back at the time that I was using the Strength Finder over in Dubai, it's with some level of embarrassment, because I hadn't done the course at that point, and probably not using it to its full capabilities as well. So you know, if I could go back and live my time again, I'd do it a little bit differently. But at the same time, it was really successful as well. So certainly it wasn't as though it wasn't successful and people weren't getting a lot out of it, but there's just so much more I could have given if I had, you know, what I know now.
Well, and I think that's something that we all feel, isn't it? I mean, in our strengths journey, we start off we're introduced to strengths, and we start to learn more about it, and our understanding of it matures, and our understanding of the tools and instruments. There's an awful lot of people out there who are using it just from the back of the book or from the Gallup Strength Center, and think that they've you know, understand it and have a complete understanding. But obviously, there's a lot more to it. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So I appreciate your saying that. So what about you as a local leader in your local government? How are you using it there? I mean, you have, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, 2 caps that you wear, both as a consultant and then your role as a leader within the local government in South Australia.
And I think that's, I love those 2 caps because it gives me an opportunity to be there as well as coach others in it as well. I think for me, it's the lens that I look at everything through, and whether it's, situations outside of my comfort zone, you go, as I mentioned before, you go to your strengths, whether it's about understanding my own team members more and what they need and what will energize them and de-energize them. And helping them to understand the needs of other team members. To give an example, someone in our team that we all report up through to has Maximizer. So everyone that I work with's done it. And so she has Maximizer in her top 5. And when we first started working with this person, people would submit their reports or submit their ideas up to her, and it would come back with suggestions scribbled on it or changes, and people were almost feeling a bit demotivated by that. Like, I just can't get this right, myself included, until I realised, that's her Maximizer. The fact that she's spending some time is showing that she actually thinks this is a really good piece of work and wants to add value to it. If she ignores it completely, maybe we haven't hit the mark. And so it really helps what could have been a bit of a demotivating, almost conflict situation. It helps people to go, oh, okay, that's what that's about. And it's links to building. I use it in when I'm putting together a project team, who needs to be on this team. I've used it in the change management process. We had a huge restructure, and it was great to be able to give something very tangible that people could contribute to that change process by, okay, well, you have really strong empathy skills, so I need you out there doing the pulse check on how everyone's dealing with this. Our leadership team at that time actually was a bit low in communication and influencing themes, so we were able to go, okay, we need some support structures around that because we're low in that communication. So it's just something that we're constantly using in my performance management, in determining what training to offer to people. It's something that we use for all of that, and interestingly, very effective. We recently, just last month, had our organisational culture retested, and so we got the results back from the team. And my team, it's just been this amazing success story of a turnaround over the 3 years between the measurements. And I put that down largely to, and I mean, there's lots of contributing factors, but certainly the strength approach and the strength culture is a huge part of that.
Yeah, fantastic. If you could just give a couple of bullet points as to your favorite resources, your favorite tools that you use. Is there something that you have go-tos, thought leaders that you follow, blogs that you read, just some bullet points about the ones you think other people listening should check out?
Yeah, there's so many because of my input strength. I'm always on the reading something or listening to something. But one of my favorites is actually Success Magazine. So I subscribe to that, and it comes with the audio CD. And I think Darren Hardy, the editor and the interviewer, is just fantastic. In his way, he gets these amazing thought leaders, everyone from John Maxwell to Jack Welch. Last night I was listening to the CEO of Zappo. These fantastic people in there. But he, as an interviewer, has this amazing ability to sort of distill down the concepts, and I guess it appeals to my activator strength, but then come up with very tangible actions that people can take away from that. And so for me, that's a great resource. I subscribe to the Seth Godin blog. I really think he's a great mind. My treat is TED Talks. I really like to listen to a TED Talk of industry that's got nothing to do with mine, because I think innovation often comes from taking a leading practice in another industry and applying it to your own. And it's amazing the amount of times I hear something and think, oh, that could work in coaching. So, just recently I went along to a training course, and they were talking about a tip in terms of getting groups to reflect on learnings, and I was like, oh yeah, I can use that in coaching. That's great. I'm going to try that out. So, it's amazing where you can get resources from.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, everyone knows that, or most people who are listening will know about the Call to Coach Facebook group that has lots of tips and resources there as well. So, Jim, I imagine our time is starting to wind down, but I do want to make a quick shout out. Is now a good time for me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to say hello and give a big shout out to some very enthusiastic strengths users that are in Poland, and it's with the Seuss and Clifton group, and one of our recently certified coaches put me onto this group, and they are doing some amazing work that in Poland. There's a project that's called Strengths in Giving Project, where they've gone into a small impoverished community, and they're working with some of the schools there and some of the kids in the schools who have had a particularly tough time of it. And it's brilliant to hear the kind of work that they're doing. And it's great, Jim. You know that the strengths movement is in fact a revolution, and it's sprouting up all over the globe. But there are some folks out there who don't have access to the sorts of resources and coaching training that all of us do. So just a shout out to those guys that are out there using strengths in a big and powerful way. And we're so pleased that you're part of the movement as well.
Yeah, Eastern Europe has seemed to pick up. Recently I got Hungary contacted me, and they said, do you have these resources in Hungarian? I was like, no, we don't yet. We cannot race fast enough to get our stuff translated. So, and we get all kinds of people who step up and say, I'll do it for you, and it's a little more complicated than that. But certainly we appreciate that. And Mandy, great to hear from you today, and for just your insight to what we're doing here. I do want to read. So Megan is out in the chat room. She's from Adelaide there. And Megan says, I got to say that since learning more about our strengths as a team, we have taken off both personally and professionally. Knowing more about mine, and thanks to Mandy's coaching, I get a real buzz seeing my strengths in action. It's reassuring that I can tap into these strengths as and when I need them. So that's Megan out there. She's local, right there in Adelaide, and to your point, around the world. It's amazing that we get to have this conversation with you in Sydney and Mandy in Adelaide. I'm here in the United States. We're pulling this all together. We have people in the chat room from the Philippines. So it's just really cool to watch this strengths movement go on around the world. So Mandy, thanks for taking a few minutes today to be a part of what we're doing and to be a part of the movement. Great stuff, and thanks for hanging with me as we lost Ann in the middle of that too. And you'll be surprised, we didn't even skip a beat. We just kept going, and it worked out really well.
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, so good stuff. Well, I will remind folks to take full advantage of all the resources we have available. We mentioned a bunch of them here. If you go out to the Gallup Strengths Center, that's just GallupStrengthsCenter.com. That's really where everything starts, but if you want to learn more about that, of course, you can find out a whole bunch of information on our coach's blog. That's just coaching.gallup.com. You can catch the recorded audio and video of this show, plus all the past ones. Mandy was talking about Theme Thursday. The links to everything is over there on the coach's blog, so go to coaching.gallup.com. We also mentioned meetups in this time we have together. We have some 30 now global meetups going on around the world. If you want to stop over to the meetup page, again, go to the coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. Click on the meetups tab. If your city's not represented, it needs to be. So just let us know. We'd like to get 100 of these going around the world here by the end of the year. So that's one of my goals. One of those action plans, Mandy, right? That's action, right?
Okay.
And that, I need to get 100 of these meetups going around the world. We'd like your city to be a part of it. Let us know if you can help out. You can send me an email, jim_collison@gallup.com. I'll help you get that started as well. Don't forget that we also have Android and iPhone apps available for you. You can download those, get your top 5 right there on your phone, make it your lock screen so you'll never forget what those are. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you enjoyed it, I would encourage you to share this, and we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say good night, everybody. Or good morning, I guess, there in Australia. Thanks.